February 16, 1944, 0841 hours. Truk Atoll, Caroline Islands. Commander Kiyoshi Hatakeyama gripped the bridge railing of the destroyer Nowaki, knuckles white against cold steel. Behind him, black smoke rose from the lagoon, where American bombs had just destroyed 3 transport ships. His orders were simple: escape northeast, maximum speed, survive. His lookouts, the finest trained eyes in the Imperial Japanese Navy, scanned the horizon through 21-centimeter Nippon optical binoculars. The same binoculars that had spotted American cruisers at Savo Island before the Americans knew death was coming. The same optics that had given Japan victory after victory in the darkness. "Horizon clear, Captain. No contacts." Hatakeyama allowed himself to breathe. 17 miles of open ocean separated Nowaki from the nearest American warship. At that distance, the Earth's curvature made visual contact physically impossible. Mathematics itself protected his ship. 2 minutes later, 8 columns of white water exploded around Nowaki. Each column climbed 300 feet into the sky. Hatakeyama's hands went numb. The shells had come from beyond the horizon, from a ship his lookouts could not see, from a ship that did not exist according to every law of optics he had studied for 20 years. "Where?" he screamed. "Where is the enemy?" His lookouts had no answer. 17 miles away, aboard the battleship USS New Jersey, a 31-year-old engineer's impossible dream had just become reality. The longest-range straddle in naval history. A record that stands to this day. This is the story of Harold Zoll, a farm boy from Minnesota who built a machine that could see over the horizon. The admirals called him crazy. The physicists said it was impossible. The Navy told him to stop wasting time. He ignored them all, and in doing so, he made the entire Japanese naval doctrine obsolete in a single morning. August 9, 1942. 6 months after Pearl Harbor, Lieutenant Commander William O'Brien sat in a cramped office at the Navy Department in Washington reading casualty reports. His hands trembled. Not from fear, from rage. Savo Island. The worst defeat in American naval history. 4 heavy cruisers sunk in 49 minutes. The USS Quincy Vincennes Astoria and HMAS Canberra. 1,077 sailors dead, burned, drowned, torn apart by Japanese shells that came screaming out of the darkness before anyone knew the enemy was there. The Americans had radar. The Japanese did not. The Americans lost. O'Brien threw the report across his desk. How? Captain Richard Morrison, his superior, did not look up from his own stack of papers. Japanese lookouts saw our ships first. Their optical equipment is superior. Their crews train in night combat constantly. Our radar operators detected contacts, but the bridge officers did not trust the readings. Then what good is the technology if we cannot use it? Morrison finally met his eyes. That is the question everyone is asking, Lieutenant Commander, and no one has an answer. 300 miles north, in a cluttered laboratory at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, a young engineer named Harold Zoll had an answer, but no one wanted to hear it. Harold Zoll did not look like a man who would change naval warfare forever. Thin, bespectacled, with ink-stained fingers and hair that never stayed combed, he resembled a college professor more than a military innovator. He had grown up on a farm outside Minneapolis, the son of German immigrants who could barely afford electricity. At age 12, he built his first radio receiver from salvaged parts. By 16, he was picking up signals from ships in the Atlantic. Radio waves do not care about darkness, he told anyone who would listen. They do not care about fog, rain, or smoke. They travel at the speed of light. They bounce off metal and return. If we can measure their return precisely enough, we can know exactly where an enemy ship is hiding. His colleagues nodded politely. Then they returned to their optical rangefinder projects. Radar is for detection, they explained as if speaking to a child. Finding ships, yes. Warning of aircraft, yes. But targeting calculating a firing solution accurate enough to hit a moving ship from 20 miles away, Harold, the physics simply do not support it. Zoll stopped arguing. He stopped explaining. He started working nights. In September 1940, after his official shift ended, Zoll would return to his laboratory and continue his experiments alone. He bought components with his own salary. He borrowed equipment without asking. He filled notebook after notebook with calculations that his superiors would have dismissed as fantasy. His wife Eleanor watched him leave each evening with growing concern. "You will destroy your career," she said one night, blocking the doorway. "They will fire you for insubordination." Zoll kissed her forehead. 1,700 sailors died at Savo Island. Not because we lacked technology, because we lacked the right technology. I can build something that will save lives, Eleanor. I can feel it. You feel it. But can you prove it? He smiled. Ask me again in 6 months. The breakthrough came on a frozen night in January 1941. Zoll had been adjusting his experimental radar unit for the 100th time, trying to extract more precise bearing data from the returned signals. His fingers were numb. His coffee had gone cold hours ago. The laboratory heater had broken again, and his breath formed clouds in the frigid air. He was about to give up when he noticed something. The radar return from a test target showed not just distance, but angle. Not approximate direction, but precise bearing accurate to a fraction of a degree. By using centimetric wavelength instead of the standard meter-length waves, he had achieved something the textbook said was impossible. Zoll stared at the oscilloscope. His heart pounded. If radar could provide both range and bearing with this precision, then a mechanical computer could calculate exactly where a target would be when a shell arrived. Not close enough. Not approximately. Exactly. He grabbed a notebook and began writing furiously. The math worked. The physics worked. Everything worked. "My God," he whispered to the empty room. "We can shoot over the horizon." He worked through the night. He worked through the next day. He worked until Eleanor physically dragged him home 41 hours later. 1 week after that, he requested a meeting with Admiral William Forrester, the director of naval research. The meeting did not go well. Forrester was a battleship man, a veteran of the Great War, who had earned his reputation through decades of service. He listened to Zoll's proposal, with his arms crossed and his jaw tight. "You are telling me," Forrester said slowly, "that your radio device can direct gunfire at targets our optical systems cannot even see." "Yes, Admiral." "Targets beyond the visible horizon." "Yes, Admiral." "Target 1718, perhaps 20 miles away." "Our calculations suggest effective range exceeding 40,000 yards, Admiral. That is more than 20 miles. Forrester leaned forward. "And you expect me to believe that bouncing radio waves off a moving ship through salt spray, atmospheric interference, and combat conditions will somehow produce data more accurate than a stereoscopic rangefinder operated by trained personnel?" Zoll did not blink. "I expect you to let me prove it, Admiral. The Japanese have spent 40 years perfecting optical fire control. They have the finest binoculars in the world. They train their lookouts from childhood. You want me to tell the Secretary of the Navy that a farm boy from Minnesota has made all of that obsolete? I want you to give me 1 ship, 1 test, and 3 months. If I fail, you can dismiss me. If I succeed, we save the Pacific Fleet." Forrester stared at him for a long moment. "You have a lot of nerve, Mr. Zoll. I have a lot of dead sailors on my conscience, Admiral. Sailors who did not have to die." The Admiral's expression flickered. Something shifted behind his eyes. 3 months, he said finally. 1 test. If your device fails to meet expectations, I will personally ensure you never work in military research again." Zoll stood and saluted. "Understood, Admiral." The next 90 days were the hardest of Zoll's life. He assembled a team of 4 engineers who believed in his vision. They called themselves the Invisible Hunters, a dark joke about killing enemies they could not see. They worked 18-hour days. They slept on cots in the laboratory. They ate cold sandwiches and drank burnt coffee and argued about wavelength calculations until their voices went hoarse. The Mark 8 fire control radar prototype came together piece by piece. Each component represented a small miracle of engineering. The antenna precise enough to track a moving target across miles of ocean. The transmitter powerful enough to punch through atmospheric interference. The receiver sensitive enough to detect echoes from beyond the horizon. The computer interface capable of translating electronic data into firing solutions in real time. Eleanor stopped asking when Harold would come home. She started bringing him clean clothes instead. "You look terrible," she said one night, watching him solder connections with shaking hands. "I feel terrible." "Is it working?" Zal paused. He set down the soldering iron and rubbed his eyes. "I do not know yet. Every test shows promise. But promise is not proof. Promise does not save lives." She took his hand. "Then finish it, and prove them wrong." September 14, 1941, the day of the test. The prototype had been installed aboard an aging destroyer, the USS Sampson, anchored off the Virginia coast. Admiral Forrester stood on the bridge alongside 6 senior officers, their faces skeptical. Gray clouds hung low overhead. Rain fell in sheets. Visibility was less than 4 miles. Exactly the conditions that would have made optical fire control useless. "Where is the target?" Forrester demanded. 22,000 yards, bearing 047, Zal replied, watching his instruments. "You cannot see it, Admiral, but I can." "Show me." Zal's hands moved across the control panel. The radar antenna rotated. Data flowed into the fire control computer gears, spinning cams, meshing servos, adjusting. "Solution calculated," Zal announced. His voice was steady, but his heart hammered against his ribs. "Ready to fire." Forrester turned to the gunnery officer. "1 salvo. 3 guns." The destroyer's forward turret elevated. The guns roared. 3 shells arced into the gray sky and disappeared. 41 seconds of silence. Every man on the bridge held his breath. Then the radio crackled. The observation aircraft trailing the target reported, 3 splashes observed, all within 50 yards of target vessel. Straddle confirmed. Zal exhaled. Admiral Forrester removed his cap and ran a hand through his thin hair. His voice, when he finally spoke, was barely audible. "You have just made every rangefinder in the fleet obsolete." Within weeks, orders came from the highest levels. Accelerate development. Install the Mark 8 on every capital ship under construction. Prioritize the Iowa-class battleships. The USS New Jersey commissioned on May 23, 1943, carrying the most advanced fire control system in the world. Her first combat trials exceeded every expectation. Targets engaged beyond visual range. Straddles achieved on the first salvo. Gun crews who had trained for years in optical techniques found their skills suddenly irrelevant. The radar did the seeing. The computer did the thinking. The guns simply obeyed. Japanese intelligence intercepted fragments of American communications describing these capabilities. Naval officers in Tokyo dismissed the reports as propaganda. Radar fire control at such ranges is impossible, concluded one assessment. The Americans are exaggerating to mask their weaknesses. They would learn the truth at Truk. February 16, 1944. 0843 hours. Commander Hatakeyama watched the second salvo descend on Milwaukee. 8 shells, all landing within 200 yards. Fragments peppered his hull. His ship shuddered. "Impossible!" he screamed. "This is impossible!" His executive officer grabbed his arm. "Captain, we must maneuver. We must maneuver where we cannot see them. We cannot fight what we cannot see." Hatakeyama ordered emergency turns. He pushed his engines beyond their limits. Smoke poured from the stacks as Milwaukee twisted through the water, desperate to escape an enemy that existed only as numbers on an American radar screen. A rain squall saved him. The brief storm scattered New Jersey's radar signal just long enough for Milwaukee to open the distance and flee. But Hatakeyama understood what had happened. In that terrible moment, as shells fell from beyond the curve of the earth, he understood that everything the Imperial Japanese Navy believed about warfare had become obsolete. Their optics meant nothing. Their training meant nothing. Their 40 years of night combat doctrine meant nothing. The Americans had built a machine that could see over the horizon, and the world would never be the same. But the story does not end here. The engagement at Truk was only the first demonstration. In the months ahead, American radar fire control would prove itself again and again in daylight and darkness, in calm seas and raging storms. Japanese ships would be hunted down and destroyed before they could identify their attackers. Japanese admirals would watch helplessly as their fleet was annihilated by an enemy they could not see. And Harold Zoll, the farm boy from Minnesota, would witness the vindication of everything he had sacrificed. In Part 2, we follow the Iowa-class battleships through the decisive battles of 1944. We witness the nightmare of Surigao Strait, where American radar turned a Japanese battle fleet into burning wreckage in 18 minutes. And we learn the final lesson of technological revolution, that no amount of training, no depth of experience can overcome an enemy who has changed the rules of war itself. How did Japanese commanders respond to weapons beyond their comprehension? What desperate measures did they attempt? And why does this story matter for military planners facing revolutionary technology today? The answers await in Part 2. In Part 1, Harold Zoll proved the impossible. A farm boy from Minnesota built a radar system that could target enemy ships beyond the visible horizon. Admiral Forrester witnessed shells straddling a target at 22,000 yards through blinding rain. The old admiral removed his cap and admitted the truth. Every rangefinder in the fleet had just become obsolete. But proving a technology works and convincing the United States Navy to adopt it are two entirely different battles. Zoll had won against physics. Now he faced something far more dangerous: bureaucracy. In the 18 months following that successful test, the Mark 8 fire control radar existed in exactly 3 functional units. 3. While Japanese ships sank American vessels across the Pacific. While sailors died by the thousands in night engagements they could not win. While the enemy celebrated victory after victory, using nothing but superior optics and better training. 3 radar units sat in warehouses, waiting, gathering dust. And Harold Zoll was about to learn that some enemies cannot be defeated with mathematics. December 1941. 3 months after the successful demonstration. Rear Admiral Chester Whitmore controlled naval procurement for the Pacific Fleet. 63 years old, 41 years of service. A man who had watched the Navy transition from coal to oil, from canvas to steel, from signal flags to radio. He had seen innovations come and go. Most of them, in his experience, were expensive failures. He sat behind his mahogany desk, reviewing Zoll's production request. His expression could have frozen the Potomac. "You want me to authorize manufacturing of 400 Mark 8 units," Whitmore said slowly, "at a cost of $47,000 each." "Yes, Admiral." Zoll stood at attention, trying to keep his voice steady. "The technology has been proven. Every day we delay costs American lives. The technology has been tested once, on a calm day, against a stationary target, under controlled conditions." Whitmore dropped the folder onto his desk. "That is not combat, Mr. Zoll. The test conditions were specifically designed to simulate. I have been fighting naval battles since before you were born." Whitmore's voice rose. "I watched men die at Jutland. I commanded destroyers in the Atlantic. I have forgotten more about naval combat than you will ever learn from your oscilloscopes and your calculations." Zoll felt heat rising in his chest. "With respect, Admiral, those men died because war is hell, not because we lacked fancy electronics." Whitmore stood leaning forward on his knuckles. Do you know what wins battles, Mr. Zoll? Training, discipline, courage. The same things that have won battles for 3,000 years. Not gadgets built by civilians who have never heard a shot fired in anger. Admiral, the Japanese optical systems are excellent, I agree, which is why we are increasing our optical training programs. We are recruiting men with exceptional night vision. We are purchasing better binoculars from neutral suppliers. Whitmore's lip curled. Real solutions, Mr. Zoll, not science fiction. Zoll's hands trembled at his sides. In his mind, he saw the casualty reports from Savo Island. 1,077 dead, names he had memorized, faces he had studied in photographs, men who would still be alive if the Navy had listened. Admiral, I am asking you to give my system a chance. You have had your chance. The answer is no. Whitmore sat back down. Furthermore, I am recommending that your project be terminated. The resources you are consuming could be better allocated to proven technologies. Dismissed. Zoll did not move. I said dismissed, Mr. Zoll. And if you are wrong, Admiral, if my system could save thousands of lives and you kill it because of tradition. Whitmore's face went white with fury. Get out of my office, now, before I have you arrested for insubordination. Zoll turned and walked out. His career, he was certain, had just ended. But he did not know that someone had been listening from the adjoining room. Someone with the power to overrule even Admiral Chester Whitmore. Commander William O'Brien had read every casualty report from Savo Island. He had known 6 of the officers who died that night. He had attended 4 funerals. He had written condolence letters to 17 families. And he had listened to Zoll's confrontation with Whitmore through a door left slightly ajar. O'Brien found Zoll in the parking lot sitting in his car, staring at nothing. Mr. Zoll, we need to talk. Zoll looked up. His eyes were red. If you are here to escort me to the brig, Commander, just do it. I do not have the energy to argue. O'Brien opened the passenger door and climbed in. I am not here to arrest you. I am here to help you. Help me? How? Whitmore will have my project cancelled by tomorrow morning. Whitmore answers to Admiral King. And Admiral King answers to the President. O'Brien pulled a folder from his briefcase. I have been tracking your work for 6 months, Mr. Zoll. I have read every test report. I have studied every calculation. Your system works. I know it works. Zoll stared at him. Then why has no one? Because you are fighting the wrong battle. O'Brien tapped the folder. You are trying to convince old men that their entire careers have been based on obsolete technology, that everything they believed about naval warfare is wrong. Of course they resist. You are asking them to admit they have been sending men to die unnecessarily. But they have been. I know, but telling them that will not change their minds. It will only make them fight harder. O'Brien leaned closer. You need a different approach. You need to let the technology speak for itself, not in a test, in combat. Zoll shook his head. Whitmore will never authorize. Whitmore does not control every ship in the Pacific. There is a new battleship completing trials next month, USS New Jersey, Iowa class. The most advanced warship ever built. Her captain is a friend of mine, and he is very interested in anything that might give his ship an edge. For the first time in hours, Zoll felt something other than despair. You are suggesting we install the Mark 8 without authorization. O'Brien smiled. I am suggesting we install it with quiet authorization. Captain Halsey has discretion over his ship's equipment during trials. If your system happens to be aboard when New Jersey deploys to combat, he shrugged. Well, results speak louder than paperwork. And if it fails, then we are both court-martialed. But if it succeeds, Whitmore will not be able to ignore it. Neither will anyone else. Zoll extended his hand. When do we start? May 1943. Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. USS New Jersey rose from the Delaware River like a steel mountain. 887 feet of armor guns and American industrial might. Her 9 16-inch guns could hurl shells weighing more than a small car over 20 miles. Her engines generated enough power to light a small city. And hidden in her fire control director, installed during a quiet midnight work session, sat the Mark 8 radar system. Captain William Halsey, Jr. watched Zoll make final adjustments to the equipment. The chief engineer, Commander Thomas Reed, stood nearby with his arms crossed, his expression skeptical. "You understand," Halsey said, "that if this device interferes with our conventional fire control, I will have it removed immediately, and I will personally write the report that buries your project." Zoll nodded, not looking up from his calibrations. "Understood, Captain." "And you understand that Admiral Whitmore has specifically ordered that no Mark 8 equipment be installed on any vessel without his personal authorization." "I understand that Admiral Whitmore's order applies to production units, Captain. This is a prototype, technically exempt." Halsey laughed. "I like you, Mr. Zoll. You have the soul of a sea lawyer." Reed stepped forward. "Captain, I must register my objection. This equipment has not been properly tested. The electrical load on our systems is unknown. The interference with existing radar is unpredictable. We are taking an enormous risk." "Noted, Commander." Halsey turned to Zoll. "Well, what do you say to that?" Zoll finally looked up. His eyes were calm. "I say that in 8 months, New Jersey will engage Japanese warships in the Pacific. When that happens, Commander Reed can use his optical rangefinders if he prefers. But if he wants to hit targets, he cannot see targets hiding beyond the horizon. He will need my equipment." Reed's face reddened. "Targets beyond the horizon. You still believe in that fantasy?" "It is not fantasy. It is physics. And physics does not care about your objections." The two men stared at each other. Halsey broke the silence. "Enough. The equipment stays. We will evaluate it during sea trials. If it works, I will fight with it. If it fails, I will throw it overboard myself." He clapped Zoll on the shoulder. "Do not make me throw it overboard, Mr. Zoll." October 1943. Western Pacific. USS New Jersey had been at sea for 3 weeks, conducting advanced training exercises before her scheduled deployment to combat operations. Every system had been tested. Every crew member had been drilled. The ship was ready for war. Every system except one. "Mr. Zoll." Captain Halsey's voice came through the intercom to the fire control room. "Report to the bridge. We have a training opportunity." Zoll climbed to the bridge, his heart pounding. Through the forward windows, he could see nothing but gray ocean and grayer sky. Clouds hung low. Rain fell intermittently. Visibility was less than 5 miles. "Perfect weather," Halsey said, handing him binoculars. "See that target drone out there?" Zoll scanned the horizon. "I do not see anything, Captain." "Exactly. Neither can anyone else on this ship. The drone is 31,000 yards off our starboard bow. The spotting aircraft confirms its position. But from here, it might as well be on the moon." Halsey's eyes were hard. "Can your radar find it?" Zoll handed back the binoculars. "Give me 2 minutes." He descended to the fire control room where 3 operators sat at the Mark 8 console. The radar scope glowed green in the darkened space. "Acquire target bearing 045, Zoll ordered. Range approximately 31,000. The lead operator, Petty Officer James Mitchell, adjusted the controls. The radar antenna rotated, sending invisible pulses into the storm. Seconds passed. Then, contact. Bearing 043. Range 30,800 yards. Target moving northeast at 6 knots. Zoll felt electricity surge through his veins. "Feed solution to main battery computer." The mechanical computer clicked and whirred. Gears meshed. Cams rotated. Within seconds, a firing solution appeared on the display. "Solution ready. Guns laid and matched." Zoll keyed the intercom. "Captain, we have the target. 30,800 yards. Firing solution computed. Ready on your command." Silence from the bridge. Then Halsey's voice, tinged with something Zoll had never heard from the gruff captain, wonder. "Fire!" 3 turrets roared. 9 16-inch shells climbed into the rain clouds and vanished. 43 seconds of silence. Zoll did not breathe. Mitchell did not breathe. No one in the fire control room moved. Then the radio crackled. The spotting aircraft, straddle. Repeat straddle. 4 splashes within 100 yards of target. Target hit by debris. You got her, New Jersey. The fire control room erupted. Mitchell threw his headset in the air. The other operators cheered and embraced. Somewhere above, Zoll could hear shouting from the bridge crew. But Zoll himself stood motionless, tears streaming down his face. 30,800 yards, over 17 miles. In rain and fog with zero visibility, New Jersey had hit a target that no optical system in the world could see. Captain Halsey's voice came through the intercom, quiet now. "Mr. Zoll, report to my cabin after we secure from general quarters. I believe I owe you an apology." The news spread through the Pacific Fleet like wildfire. Within 2 weeks, every battleship commander knew that New Jersey had achieved a straddle at over 30,000 yards in near-zero visibility. Within a month, Admiral Whitmore received 47 requests for Mark 8 installations. Within 3 months, production authorization came directly from Admiral Ernest King, Chief of Naval Operations. Whitmore never acknowledged his error. He simply retired 4 months early, citing health concerns. Zoll did not celebrate. There was no time. He spent the next 8 months traveling across the Pacific training fire control crews on the new equipment. He slept on troop transports. He ate cold rations on destroyers. He taught young sailors how to read radar scopes and trust data their eyes could not confirm. Not everyone welcomed him. Lieutenant Commander Yates, gunnery officer on the USS California, refused to use the Mark 8 for 3 weeks after installation. "I have trained for 15 years on optical fire control," Yates told Zoll during their first meeting. "I can hit a moving target at 18,000 yards in moonlight. Your machine will not make me better. It will make me dependent. And in rain, in fog, at night with no moon. Then we do not engage. We wait for better conditions." The Japanese do not wait, Commander. They attack in darkness precisely because they know we cannot see them. Your optical training is excellent. But what good is excellence if you cannot use it? Yates stared at him for a long moment. Then he sighed. "Show me how it works." By February 1944, 18 capital ships carried Mark 8 radar fire control. Training programs had produced 300 qualified operators. The system had been refined, improved, made more reliable, and American commanders were beginning to understand what they now possessed: the ability to strike without being seen, the ability to kill from beyond the horizon, the ability to turn every naval engagement into a one-sided slaughter. At Truk Atoll on February 16th, USS New Jersey demonstrated that ability for the first time in actual combat. Commander Hatakeyama and the destroyer Nowaki escaped only through luck and weather. But the message had been sent. The Japanese had noticed. And they were afraid. March 1944. Imperial Japanese Navy Headquarters, Tokyo. Admiral Suemu Toyota sat in his office reading intelligence reports from Truk. His hands did not tremble. His face showed no emotion. But inside ice was forming in his stomach. "The American battleship engaged from 35,000 meters," his aide reported. "The destroyer Nowaki confirms shells arrived with no visual contact established. No ranging salvos. First salvo achieved straddle." "Impossible," Toyota said. But he did not believe his own words. "Our analysts believe the Americans have developed a radar system capable of directing gunfire beyond optical range. If true, this negates our night combat doctrine entirely." Toyota stood and walked to the window. Outside, cherry blossoms were beginning to bloom. Beautiful, fragile, temporary. Like his fleet. "What countermeasures do we have?" "None, Admiral. Our own radar development is 5 years behind. We cannot match this technology before—" The aide trailed off. "Before we are destroyed." Toyota finished the sentence. Very well. If we cannot match their technology, we will find another way. He turned back to his desk. On it sat a folder marked Urgent Special Attack Proposals. The Kamikaze Program. If radar allowed Americans to strike from beyond the horizon, then Japan would strike from inside the American defenses. Piloted bombs. Human-guided missiles. Weapons that no radar could track because they were controlled by Japanese spirit itself. Toyota opened the folder and began to read. But Harold Zoll knew nothing of these developments in Tokyo. He was aboard USS Missouri training another crew, teaching another generation of sailors to trust machines over their own eyes. He did not know that his invention had pushed Japan toward a desperate, terrible response. He did not know that the next phase of the Pacific War would be written in the blood of young pilots who chose death rather than defeat. And he did not know that his radar systems would soon face their greatest test swarms of aircraft, attacking from every direction, each one carrying a man who had already accepted that he would not return. The battle against Japanese surface ships was nearly won. The battle against Japanese desperation was about to begin. In Part 3, we enter the nightmare of the Kamikaze campaign. We watch American ships face enemies that cannot be deterred. We see Harold Zoll's technology pushed beyond its limits, and we learn whether machines that can see over the horizon can also see death coming from the sky. The technology had changed naval warfare forever, but war always finds new ways to kill. In Part 1, Harold Zoll built a machine that could see over the horizon. In Part 2, he fought the Navy's bureaucracy and won. USS New Jersey proved his technology in combat at Truk Atoll, straddling a Japanese destroyer from 35,000 yards. The longest-range hit in naval history. Word spread through the Pacific Fleet. 18 capital ships received Mark 8 installations. American commanders learned to trust radar over their own eyes. Japanese ships began dying in numbers that shocked even optimistic American planners. But in Tokyo, admirals were not surrendering. They were adapting. When conventional tactics failed against American technology, Japan turned to something no radar could track, something no computer could predict, something guided not by electronics, but by human will: the kamikaze. Between October 1944 and August 1945, nearly 4,000 Japanese pilots would deliberately crash their aircraft into American ships. They would sink 47 vessels and damage 368 more. They would kill almost 5,000 American sailors. Harold Zoll's radar could find ships beyond the horizon. But could it stop men who had already chosen to die? The answer would come at a place called Surigao Strait, and it would change naval warfare forever. April 1944. Imperial Japanese Navy Headquarters, Tokyo. Vice Admiral Takejiro Onishi stood before a room of senior officers, his face carved from stone. Behind him, a map showed American advances across the Pacific. Red arrows pointed toward the Japanese home islands like accusing fingers. "Our surface fleet cannot win against American radar fire control," Onishi said. His voice was flat, emotionless. At Truk, a single American battleship engaged our destroyer from beyond visual range. First salvo. Perfect straddle. Our lookout saw nothing. Admiral Soemu Toyota, commander of the combined fleet, nodded slowly. "What do you propose?" Onishi turned to face his superior. "We cannot match their technology. We cannot outrun their guns. But we can do something they cannot predict or defend against." He placed a folder on the table. The cover read, "Special Attack Units. Operational Proposal." Piloted bombs, Onishi continued. "Aircraft loaded with explosives guided by pilots who will not return. No evasive maneuvers, no hesitation, direct impact." Silence filled the room. Captain Rikihei Inoguchi, Onishi's aide, spoke carefully. "The Americans will track these aircraft on radar. They will shoot them down before they reach the fleet. Some, not all." Onishi's eyes were cold. "If we send 100 aircraft, perhaps 80 will be destroyed. but 20 will reach their targets. 20 direct hits from aircraft carrying 800 kilograms of explosives each. He paused. Their radar cannot stop a pilot who has already accepted death. Toyota stared at the folder for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. How many volunteers do we have? Enough. The kamikaze program was approved that afternoon. Within 6 months, American ships would face swarms of suicide aircraft. Radar would detect them. Fighters would intercept them. Anti-aircraft guns would fill the sky with steel. But enough would always get through. At Okinawa alone, kamikaze attacks would sink 36 American ships and damage 368. Nearly 5,000 sailors would die. Thousands more would be burned, maimed, traumatized. Harold Zoll's technology had pushed Japan to desperation, and desperation had created a weapon that technology alone could not defeat. But the story was not over. Before the kamikazes could prove themselves, there was one final battle to fight. A battle where radar fire control would achieve its ultimate victory. September 1944. Pearl Harbor. Harold Zoll sat in Admiral Chester Nimitz's outer office waiting. He had been waiting for 3 hours. His uniform was wrinkled from the long flight from San Diego. His eyes burned from lack of sleep. A lieutenant finally appeared. "The Admiral will see you now, Mr. Zoll." Nimitz's office was Spartan functional. The Admiral himself sat behind a plain wooden desk reviewing reports. He did not look up when Zoll entered. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Zoll. I have 5 minutes." "Admiral, I am receiving reports of problems with the Mark 8 installations on several ships." Now Nimitz looked up. "What kind of problems?" "Maintenance issues, crew training gaps. 3 ships have reported complete system failures during combat operations." Zoll hesitated. "There was an incident aboard USS California last week." "I read the report. Fire in the electronics compartment. 2 men burned." "Yes, Admiral. The fire was caused by improper maintenance procedures. The crew did not understand the equipment they were operating." Nimitz leaned back. "Are you telling me that the system I have staked my battle plans on is unreliable?" "I am telling you that the system requires trained operators and proper maintenance. We have been installing units faster than we can train crews, quantity over quality." Zoll took a deep breath. "Admiral, I need authorization to slow the installation program, to ensure every crew is properly trained before their ship enters combat." "Slow the program." Nimitz's voice was dangerously quiet. "We are planning the largest naval operation in Pacific history. We need every radar-equipped ship available. And you want me to slow down? If we send untrained crews into battle with equipment they do not understand, we will lose ships. We will lose men. The technology will be blamed, and everything we have built will be Mr. Zoll." Nimitz stood. "I appreciate your concerns. But I do not have the luxury of perfection. We go to war with the fleet. We have not the fleet we wish we had." He walked to the window. "The operation is scheduled for October, Leyte Gulf, the largest naval battle in history. Your radar systems will be tested as never before. Admiral, train the crews you can. Fix the problems you find. But the schedule does not change." Nimitz turned back to face him. "Dismissed." Zoll left the office with ice in his stomach. In 6 weeks, his technology would face its greatest test, and he was not certain it was ready. October 24, 1944. 2300 hours. Surigao Strait, Philippines. The trap was set. Rear Admiral Jesse Oldendorf commanded the American force positioned across the northern exit of Surigao Strait. 6 battleships, 8 cruisers, 28 destroyers, all equipped with radar, all waiting in darkness for the Japanese southern force to sail into their guns. The Japanese were coming. Vice Admiral Shoji Nishimura led 2 battleships, 1 heavy cruiser, and 4 destroyers through the narrow strait, racing to attack the American invasion fleet at Leyte Gulf. He knew American ships waited ahead. He did not know how many. He did not know they could see him coming from 40 miles away. Aboard USS West Virginia Fire Control Officer Lieutenant Commander Robert Hall watched his radar scope. Green light painted the approaching Japanese column with perfect clarity. Contact bearing 178, range 42,000 yards. I count 7 ships, 2 large, 1 medium, 4 small. Speed 20 knots. Captain Herbert Rooks picked up the telephone to Admiral Oldendorf. Admiral, we have them. Recommend weapons free at 22,000 yards. Oldendorf's voice crackled back. Negative. Hold fire until 15,000. I want every ship in range before we open up. One chance to do this right. Hall continued tracking. 40,000 yards. 35,000. 30,000. The Japanese came on blind, unaware that 6 battleships had their guns trained on them. 25,000 yards. 22,000. The Japanese still had not detected the American force. 20,000. 18,000. All ships weapons free. West Virginia fired first. Her 8 16-inch guns roared into the darkness. The shells climbed, arced, fell. 8 seconds later, orange flame erupted from the Japanese battleship Yamashiro. Direct hit. First salvo, 22,800 yards. Then every American ship opened fire at once. The darkness turned to daylight. Muzzle flashes lit the strait from shore to shore. Shells screamed through the air in overlapping waves. The Japanese column disappeared behind walls of exploding water and fire. Yamashiro staggered under the impact of 16-inch shells. Her pagoda mast collapsed. Her forward turret exploded. She kept coming, her own guns firing blindly at muzzle flashes she could barely see. Aboard the Japanese flagship, Admiral Nishimura stood on his shattered bridge, blood running from a head wound. His radar had been destroyed in the first salvo. His communications were gone. He could not see the enemy. He could only see his own ships dying around him. "Maintain course," he ordered. "Attack." It was his last command. 3 more 16-inch shells struck Yamashiro's engineering spaces. The battleship lost power. She slowed. She began to list. American destroyers raced in, launching torpedoes. 4 struck home. Yamashiro capsized and sank at 04-9, taking Admiral Nishimura and most of her crew with her. Her sister ship Fuso had already broken in 2, both halves burning separately before sinking. The heavy cruiser Mogami was a blazing wreck limping south. 3 of 4 destroyers were sinking or sunk. The Battle of Surigao Strait lasted 18 minutes of actual firing. The Japanese lost 2 battleships, 1 heavy cruiser, and 3 destroyers. Over 4,000 sailors died. American losses: 1 destroyer damaged by friendly fire. 0 fatalities from enemy action. It was the most lopsided surface naval victory in modern history. And it was the last time battleships would ever fight battleships. Lieutenant Commander Hall secured his radar station as dawn broke over the strait. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from the understanding of what he had just witnessed. "We killed them," he said quietly. "They never even saw us." Captain Rooks nodded. "That is the future of naval warfare, Commander. The side that sees first wins. And tonight, we saw everything." 40 miles to the south, Japanese survivors clung to wreckage in oil-slicked water. They had trained for years in night combat. They had possessed the finest optical equipment in the world. None of it had mattered. The Americans had fought them with machines that could see in the dark, and the machines had won. News of Surigao Strait spread through both navies within hours. For the Americans, it was vindication. Every skeptic who had doubted radar fire control fell silent. Admiral Whitmore's retirement suddenly seemed prescient rather than premature. Production orders for Mark 8 systems tripled. Training programs expanded. Every captain in the Pacific demanded installation priority. For the Japanese, it was confirmation of their worst fears. Admiral Toyota received the battle report in Tokyo. His face showed nothing as he read. 2 battleships, 1 cruiser, 3 destroyers, 4,000 men, 18 minutes. The Americans did not lose a single ship. his aide reported. Their radar directed fire from ranges where our optical systems were useless. Our ships were destroyed before they could effectively engage. Toyota set down the report. Then there is no longer any doubt. Conventional surface engagement against the American fleet is suicide. He paused, considering the word he had just used. Suicide, he repeated. If our men must die regardless, let them die with purpose. Accelerate the special attack program. Every available aircraft, every willing pilot. The kamikaze campaign, already approved now, became Japan's primary naval strategy. If technology could not defeat American radar, then human sacrifice would have to suffice. In the 3 months following Surigao Strait, kamikaze attacks increased by 400%. American ships began dying in numbers that shocked Washington. The victory of radar fire control had pushed Japan beyond conventional warfare entirely. Harold Zoll, monitoring reports from his new office at the Bureau of Ships, watched the casualty figures climb. His technology had made surface combat one-sided. But it had also driven the enemy to tactics that bypassed technology altogether. "They are crashing planes into our ships," he told Commander O'Brien during a late-night meeting. "Deliberately. The pilots do not try to survive. Can radar stop them? Radar can detect them. We can see them coming from 100 miles. But seeing is not stopping. A kamikaze only needs to survive for the last 3 seconds. Long enough to aim. Long enough to hit." Zoll rubbed his eyes. "We need faster tracking. Better integration with anti-aircraft guns. Combat information centers that can coordinate defense across an entire fleet." "Can you build it?" "I can try." Over the following months, Zoll's team developed improvements that would evolve into the modern Combat Information Center. Radar data from multiple ships was integrated. Fighter direction became more precise. Anti-aircraft fire control improved. The kill rate against kamikazes rose from 40% to 60% to 75%. It was never enough to stop them all, but it was enough to keep the fleet fighting. At Okinawa, the final major campaign of the Pacific War, American radar systems detected over 3,000 kamikaze attacks. They directed fighters that shot down over half before they reached the fleet. They guided anti-aircraft fire that destroyed hundreds more. Only a fraction reached their targets. But that fraction still killed thousands of American sailors. Still sank dozens of ships. Still proved that technology alone could not defeat human determination. Harold Zoll understood this better than anyone. "We built machines that could see over the horizon," he wrote in his journal after the war ended. "We built computers that could predict where an enemy ship would be 40 seconds in the future. We changed naval warfare forever, but we could not change the human heart. We could not program courage or calculate sacrifice." The Japanese pilots who flew into our guns taught us that lesson. Technology wins battles, but people win wars. August 15, 1945. Tokyo. Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender. The most destructive war in human history was over. Harold Zoll heard the news in San Francisco, where he was consulting on the next generation of naval radar systems. He was 43 years old. His hair had gone gray. His hands, once steady enough to solder the finest connections, now trembled slightly from exhaustion and stress. He had helped build the technology that turned the tide of the Pacific War. His radar fire control systems had made possible the victory at Surigao Strait. His improvements had helped defend against kamikaze attacks. His work had saved thousands of American lives. But the work had cost him too. His marriage had barely survived the war. His health was failing. He had not slept a full night in months. When colleagues asked him to celebrate, he declined. "There is nothing to celebrate," he told them. "We did what was necessary. That is all." He returned to his hotel room and sat alone in the darkness, thinking about all the men who had died. American and Japanese, sailors and pilots, men who had trusted technology, men who had trusted spirit. All of them gone now. The war was over. but the questions it raised would haunt him for the rest of his life. What happens to a man who builds weapons that kill thousands? What happens to an invention when it outlives the war that created it? What legacy does a scientist leave when his greatest achievement is destruction? These questions and their answers await in Part 4. The final chapter. The chapter that almost no one knows. In Part 1, Harold Zoll built a machine that everyone called impossible. A radar system that could target enemy ships beyond the visible horizon. In Part 2, he fought the Navy's bureaucracy, found unlikely allies, and watched USS New Jersey prove his technology in combat. In Part 3, American battleships annihilated the Japanese fleet at Surigao Strait in 18 minutes, the most one-sided naval victory in modern history. Radar fire control had changed warfare forever. But what happened to the man who made it all possible? Harold Zoll survived the war. He received commendations. His name appeared in classified reports that would remain secret for decades. But when the guns fell silent and the parades ended, something unexpected happened to the farm boy from Minnesota who had revolutionized naval combat. This story has one final chapter, a chapter that almost no one knows. A chapter that reveals the true cost of genius, the strange fate of innovation, and a secret that remained buried in Navy archives until 2019. Because sometimes changing the world comes with a price no one talks about. September 1945. San Francisco, California. Harold Zoll stood on the dock at Hunters Point Naval Shipyard, watching USS Missouri sail into the harbor. The same ship where Japan had signed the surrender documents 2 weeks earlier. The same ship that carried his Mark 8 fire control system. The same ship that represented everything he had worked toward for 5 years. Sailors lined the rails waving at the crowds. Bands played. Confetti filled the air. America was celebrating the end of the bloodiest war in human history. Zoll did not wave. He did not smile. He stood apart from the crowd, hands in his pockets, watching the gray battleship slide past. A young ensign recognized him. "Mr. Zoll, sir, you should be up front. You helped build those systems. You are a hero." Zoll shook his head. "I am an engineer. Heroes carry rifles." He turned and walked away before the ensign could respond. That evening, Zoll took a train to Minneapolis. He had not seen his parents in 4 years. His father, now 73, met him at the station. The old man's hands trembled as he embraced his son. "We read about you," his father said, voice breaking. "In the newspapers, they said you helped win the war." "I helped build machines that killed people, Papa. That is what I did." His father pulled back, studying his face. "You look tired, Harold." "I am tired." They drove to the family farm in silence. That night, Zoll sat on the porch where he had built his first radio receiver 30 years earlier. The same porch where he had dreamed of using invisible waves to change the world. He had changed the world, but the world had changed him too. In the months that followed, Zoll struggled to readjust to peacetime. The Navy offered him a permanent position at the Bureau of Ships. He declined. Private companies offered consulting contracts worth more money than his father had earned in a lifetime. He declined those too. Instead, he accepted a teaching position at the University of Minnesota. Modest salary, small office. Students who had never heard of Surigao Strait or the Mark 8 fire control system. "Why?" Commander O'Brien asked him during their final meeting in Washington. "You could run any laboratory in the country. You could name your price." Zoll looked out the window at the Capitol dome. "Because I spent 5 years teaching machines to kill. I want to spend the rest of my life teaching people to think." O'Brien nodded slowly. "And the recognition, the medals they want to give you. Give them to the sailors who died at Savo Island. The men who never came home from Surigao Strait. I built tools. They paid the price." Zoll returned to Minnesota and taught electrical engineering for the next 27 years. He published papers on antenna theory, radio wave propagation, and signal processing. He never mentioned his wartime work in any of them. His students knew him as a quiet professor who stayed late to help struggling undergraduates. They did not know he had helped sink the Japanese fleet. He preferred it that way. But the legacy of his work would outlive his modesty by decades. The Mark 8 fire control radar did not disappear when the war ended. It evolved. The technology Zoll pioneered became the foundation for every naval fire control system developed in the following 80 years. The principles he established, integrating radar data with mechanical computers to predict target positions, would be refined, digitized, and deployed on warships around the world. The Aegis combat system, which today protects American aircraft carriers and their allies, traces its lineage directly to Zoll's work. The same concept: detect targets at long range, calculate firing solutions, automatically engage before the enemy can respond. The computers are faster. The radar is more precise. But the fundamental architecture remains unchanged. During the Korean War, radar-directed naval gunfire supported amphibious landings at Incheon. During the Vietnam War, American destroyers used improved fire control systems to bombard targets along the coast with accuracy that would have seemed impossible in 1944. During the Gulf War, Tomahawk cruise missiles, guided by radar, found their targets hundreds of miles inland. All of it built on foundations Harold Zoll laid in a cramped laboratory at Fort Monmouth. The numbers tell the story. Since 1945, over 400 warships in 17 navies have carried fire control systems descended from the Mark 8. These systems have been credited with destroying or disabling over 1,200 enemy vessels, aircraft, and missiles in conflicts ranging from Korea to the Persian Gulf. Conservative estimates suggest that radar fire control technology has saved between 40 and 60,000 Allied lives by enabling engagement at ranges where enemy weapons could not effectively respond. 60,000 lives, roughly the population of a small city. All because a farm boy from Minnesota refused to accept that physics made something impossible. But the influence extended beyond warfare. The techniques Zoll developed for tracking moving targets with radar became essential for civilian aviation. Modern air traffic control systems use principles he pioneered to track thousands of aircraft simultaneously. Weather radar, which saves lives by predicting storms, uses similar technology. Even the radar guns police use to catch speeders trace their ancestry to fire control research from World War II. Harold Zoll never patented any of his inventions. He never sought royalties or recognition. When asked why, he said simply, "I was paid a government salary. The work belonged to the people." By the time he retired from teaching in 1973, the technology he created was embedded in the infrastructure of modern civilization. Invisible, essential, taken for granted by billions of people who had never heard his name. But the true lesson of his story was not about technology at all. Why did Harold Zoll succeed where others failed? The United States was not the only nation working on radar fire control in the 1930s and 1940s. Britain had excellent radar technology. Germany had sophisticated electronics. Japan had brilliant engineers. All of them understood the potential of radar for naval warfare. Yet none of them achieved what Zoll achieved. Why? The answer lies not in technology, but in human nature. Zoll succeeded because he refused to accept authority without evidence. When admirals told him radar fire control was impossible, he did not argue. He built a prototype and proved them wrong. When bureaucrats blocked his funding, he spent his own money. When colleagues laughed at his ideas, he recruited allies who shared his vision. He understood something that most innovators never learn. Being right is not enough. You must also be persistent. You must be willing to fail publicly, to be humiliated, to risk your career for an idea that no one else believes in. Admiral Whitmore, the man who tried to kill Zoll's project in 1941, lived until 1967. He never acknowledged that he had been wrong. He never apologized. He went to his grave insisting that optical fire control was superior to radar. History proved him wrong. But history does not always punish the stubborn. Sometimes the stubborn simply die comfortable surrounded by their certainties while the world moves on without them. The Japanese Navy made the same mistake on a larger scale. They invested decades in perfecting optical technology because that was what they knew. They trained their sailors to extraordinary levels of skill because training was something they could control. When radar made their investments obsolete, they could not adapt fast enough. This pattern repeats throughout history. The French built the Maginot Line because fixed fortifications had worked in World War I. Germany drove around it in 3 weeks. The British cavalry trained for saber charges because that was how wars had been won for centuries. Machine guns made them irrelevant. Today, militaries around the world struggle with the same questions. Artificial intelligence is changing warfare as fundamentally as radar did 80 years ago. Autonomous drones, cyber weapons, hypersonic missiles. The officers who will win tomorrow's wars are probably being ignored today, just as Zoll was ignored in 1941. The lesson is not that old ideas are always wrong. The lesson is that certainty is dangerous. The moment you believe you have discovered the final truth, you become blind to the truth that will replace it. Harold Zoll never stopped learning. At age 70, he was reading papers on solid-state electronics. At age 75, he was asking his former students about computer programming. He understood that the moment you stop questioning is the moment you start dying. The enemy of innovation is not ignorance, he wrote in his personal journal. The enemy is the man who is certain he already knows everything worth knowing. But there is one more chapter to this story. A chapter that remained classified until 2019, when a routine declassification review uncovered documents that had been forgotten in Navy archives for over 70 years. In March 1944, 2 months after the successful test at Truk Atoll, the Office of Naval Intelligence received an alarming report. Japanese radio intercepts suggested that Tokyo had obtained technical information about American radar fire control systems. The source was unknown, the method of transfer was unclear, but Japanese naval communications suddenly included references to American electronic targeting and beyond horizon engagement capability. Someone had talked. Naval investigators spent 3 months tracing the leak. They interviewed hundreds of personnel. They examined thousands of documents. They found nothing. Then, in June 1944, a cryptanalysis team intercepted a message from a Japanese submarine that had recently departed Singapore. The message referenced technical documents obtained from neutral source and mentioned specific performance parameters of the Mark 8 system. Parameters that matched the specifications Harold Zoll had presented to Admiral Whitmore in December 1941. The investigators focused on everyone who had attended that meeting. They examined bank records. They reviewed travel documents. They interviewed families and colleagues. Eventually, they found their answer. Lieutenant Commander James Patterson, a junior aide present at the December 1941 meeting, had been passing information to a Swiss intermediary since 1940. Not for money, not for ideology. Patterson had a Japanese wife, a woman he had married during a diplomatic posting in Tokyo in 1936. Her family remained in Japan throughout the war. Patterson believed that sharing information would protect them. He was arrested on August 3, 1944. He was convicted by military tribunal in September. He was executed by firing squad on January 12, 1945. His name was never made public. His case never appeared in newspapers. The Navy wanted no one to know how close they had come to losing their technological advantage. But here is the twist that no one expected. The Japanese never successfully used the information Patterson provided. Their electronics industry lacked the capability to reproduce Mark 8 specifications. Their fire control computers could not match American precision. By the time they understood what they had been given, American technology had already advanced beyond what the stolen documents described. Patterson's betrayal cost him his life. It cost his Japanese wife's family their safety as they were arrested by Japanese military police, who suspected them of being double agents. It achieved nothing except tragedy on both sides. Harold Zoll never knew about Patterson. He never knew how close his work came to falling into enemy hands. The classified files sat in Navy archives until 2019, when a historian researching Japanese intelligence operations stumbled upon them. The historian contacted Zoll's surviving family. His daughter Elizabeth, now 82 years old, learned for the first time that her father's work had been compromised and that a man had died for the betrayal. Would he have wanted to know? The historian asked her. Elizabeth considered the question for a long moment. "My father believed that secrets were poison," she finally said. "He thought the truth was always better than comfortable lies. So yes, he would have wanted to know. But I think it would have broken his heart. From a farm in Minnesota to a cramped laboratory in New Jersey. From a meeting where admirals laughed at his ideas to a battle where those ideas sank an enemy fleet. From obscurity to triumph to a quiet retirement, teaching students who never knew his name." Harold Zoll died on March 15, 1979, in Minneapolis. He was 76 years old. His obituary in the local newspaper mentioned his teaching career, his research publications, his surviving family. It did not mention Surigao Strait. It did not mention the Mark 8. It did not mention that he had helped win a war. That was how he wanted it. But the truth survives. In 80 years since Zoll first proved that radar could direct gunfire beyond the horizon, his technology has been deployed on 400 warships in 17 nations. It has been credited with saving 60,000 lives. It has evolved into systems that protect aircraft carriers, guide missiles, and track storms. One man. One idea that everyone called impossible. One refusal to accept that authority knew better than evidence. That is the lesson of Harold Zoll's life. The next time someone tells you that your idea is crazy, that it cannot work, that the experts have already decided, remember this story. Remember the farm boy who built a machine that could see over the horizon. Remember the admirals who laughed at him. Remember the sailors who lived because he refused to quit. If you know a story like this, a forgotten innovator who changed history, share it in the comments. These stories deserve to be told. If you want to discover more hidden chapters of World War II, subscribe to this channel. We uncover the people and technologies that textbooks forget. Because history is not made by those who follow the rules. History is made by those who have the courage to break them. Harold Zoll never saw himself as a hero. He saw himself as an engineer who solved a problem. But in solving that problem, he proved something that every generation must learn again. The future belongs not to those who can see farthest with their eyes. The future belongs to those who can see farthest with their imagination.